Here on the Storytelling Lab, we talk about the art and science of storytelling, right? Even this season, we've talked about Nancy Duarte's Sparkline, we've talked about Ken Adams' Story Spine, but what do you do when there's too much science, there's too many formulas, there's too many structures, and you get a little bit lost in the sauce because you don't know how to show up and create your simple brand stories every day with all of these convoluted and complex story structures? Well, here's the answer. You keep it simple, stupid. The KISS rule. Keep it simple, stupid. What if I told you that there is simply a 3-part structure that you can follow that will always deliver and allow you to bring the art back into the story, your tone, your style, your way of storytelling? Well, luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. This is episode 199, and today is the last episode of season 13. This episode, we are going to talk about the 3-step story structure called promise, progress, and payoff. This is very similar to Aristotle's approach in Poetics, where he said a story has a beginning, middle, and end. 3 parts, the classic 3-act structure. We're not going to have all these fancy bells and whistles, all these twists and turns that you might see in the hero's journey or the story circle or any of those. We're going to keep it simple. Now, this specific approach comes from Brandon Sanderson, the promise, progress, and payoff. Brandon Sanderson, if you don't know, is a ridiculously prolific author, usually sci-fi and fantasy and young adult fiction. I'll give you one example. I mean, he's the writer of the Mistborn series and Stormlight Archive, but he famously did a crowdfunding or a crowdfund for some unreleased books that he wrote during the pandemic. And his goal was to raise $1 million to release these books to his favorite readers. Raise $1 million in 30 days. Folks, this guy raised $41 million. If that doesn't tell you something about, 1, his writing ability, and 2, his dedicated and loyal audience, I don't know what will. It's incredible. It was record-breaking. I think still holds the record. So what he does is he also goes around and lectures, and he released a bunch of these lectures that he does at colleges on YouTube late last year. And so this model started popping off. It's so simple, but from one of the most prolific authors ever. Can we, glean some wisdom from him? Yes, absolutely. So we're going to talk about that. Keeping it simple. Let's talk about this because I want you to think about this in terms of your brand stories when you have this vision or this promise. And then, of course, there's always the conflict, even though in brand storytelling, sometimes businesses are reticent to show that there's been any struggle in their business, which is silly. We can talk about that. And then, of course, there's the resolution. But let's frame it like Brandon does. Let's talk about the promise. Now, in storytelling, there are multiple promises that you make. In your business, there's a promise that you make. Here's the change that we're going to offer. Here's either the problem we're going to solve or the offer we're going to give you to make you better somehow. That is the promise that you give someone in business. In storytelling, you also give them a promise. Think about the promise of the genre, right? If it's a horror film, there's a certain expectation, a certain promise that is made by just having a horror film. We expect that we're going to be scared. You can think about that, not even just genre, but tone. Like, is this an irreverent comedy, like silly, like Airplane, Monty Python style? Is this an intelligent comedy? What is the tone that we are going to expect? This is what it is. You're just teeing up an expectation, and then flash forward, you're going to pay off that expectation. But you also have promises in the plot itself, like what do we expect is going to happen? What is the surface level sequence of events that we know we need to see happen? What is the the promise of information, of characters. There are all kinds of promises that you as a writer or a filmmaker grant your audience. You say, this is what you're going to expect. And that is what intrigues them to the point that they want to lean in and watch that or read that. Even if you're writing a book cover is a promise. The title is a promise. I often mention this on the show, but I had a book editor once tell me that his goal was to keep people turning the page. You want to catch their attention with the visual of the book cover, and then the title, and then the first page must give them something that wants them to turn to the second page. That's the same thing a promise is doing, right? You're saying, this is what you're going to expect. Now, it might not go the way that you think it's going to go, and that's okay. We're going to get to that. But there is still an inherent promise that you are giving people when you're crafting a story and they're showing up for it. Now, often when we talk about storytelling, we talk about the strength of the characters and how important that is, even more so than plot. And if you are telling a brand story, the characters that you establish, that you hope your audience relates to, is extremely important. And in your writing, in your storytelling, most of those characters, all of those characters, have some flaw. So that's an example of the promise that you have given us, the audience, as the creator of the story. Is like, if this person is jaded because they've been, their heart's been broken multiple times, and so they're closed off and reserved in this romantic comedy, that there's inherently a promise that they are going to change, because this is a problem they're struggling with. And we wouldn't be watching the movie if there wasn't going to be change. So that's an example of how you can tee up these expectations in your audience. They understand that they want to see that growth. If there's somebody that, like, let's take Simba from The Lion King. We talk about that movie a lot, that story a lot on the show. That Simba is destined to sit on the throne. That's the promise. And so when Simba leaves, you're like, wait a minute. You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be on the throne. That's a promise we're expecting. And we get that payoff eventually, but we would not be satisfied if we did not get that payoff, right? So you have an expectation. And if you craft your characters well, if you establish your tone and your voice and your genre well, you don't have to beat us over the head with the promise. It's an expectation that we get. And that leads us to the next P, progress. Progress is your act 2. That's the ups and downs. That's the journey of trying to fulfill that promise. Okay? Brandon Sanderson says, if you go back to what I said about the editor previously, Brandon Sanderson says that's what keeps us turning the page. The progress, moving forward. Now, it doesn't have to mean that everything is forward progress necessarily. We talk about this all the time on the show too, that you can't just have up, 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 up. There is no story there. That is boring, and it will remove your audience. It is like a roller coaster ride. There are ups and downs in that act too, but we need to be moving forward somehow. Now, when we get to the payoff, I'm going to come back to this point and show you what the progress needs. But first, let's talk about when it doesn't work. So we've established these promises with our characters, with our plot, with our tone. And we, the audience, need to feel like the progress on those promises is happening, that there is progress. So there is a guy named Kent from, I think it's Standard Story Company, who breaks this down, the promises, progress, and payoff model, and says, think about if you watch the show Severance right now on Apple TV with Adam Scott. Think about information promise. Like, the whole show is like, we don't know what's going on. Who's who, who's good, who's bad, why does it exist, yada, yada, yada. And if you don't watch that show, you should. So we have this promise of information, like a trail of breadcrumbs. We learn a little bit more as we go along. You probably are thinking of other movies and TV shows too that do this. It's like, a whodunit or something like that. We're trying to figure something out. So in order to do that, the progress has to be on that information. And if you feel like, if we're using the show Severance, each episode, if you feel like there's an episode where there wasn't progress and you didn't get some answers to those questions, how do you feel? Frustrated. You start to be removed from that story. So this is why it's so important for us to see it being developed, that progress being developed, even if there are obstacles that set us back. We need to see, Luke becoming more powerful in Star Wars. We need to see him start to understand the concept of the Force. And then he gets frustrated because he can't do it. And he, throws the mask off when he's working on whatever that little thing is that's shooting lasers at him on the Millennium Falcon. But he gets frustrated, right, and quits. And then he comes back. But that's progress. He got a little bit better. Might take one step back, right? But there is progress. We see him working towards it. If we had this promise that Obi-Wan Kenobi told him about becoming a Jedi Knight and how to use the Force, and then we, 45 minutes pass and we didn't talk about it, we didn't see him working towards that goal, i.e. that promise, we're confused. Again, removed from the story, which is the cardinal sin. That is what you absolutely do not want to do. Ultimately, as the storyteller, you are upholding your commitment to the promise of the story that you granted, right? It's an exchange. And if the audience feels like you're not keeping up your end of the bargain, they're out. Now, if you think about it in brand storytelling, it's the same thing. You've cast this vision of what you want to do, the change you want to affect on the world, the impact that you want to have on the world. And if we, your early adopters, your loyal customers, don't see that you are progressing on any of those promises, whether it's the promise of education and information, the promise of the type of product you said that you were going to bring to the world, the promise of the transformation that you guaranteed it would have on our lives, we start to lose trust. The cardinal sin in business. It's the same thing. You have to be moving forward and upholding your end of the bargain. That's what this is. You made a promise, keep your end of it. And finally, the third P, payoff. This is where you resolve it all. This is where you resolve the central mission in a way that feels satisfying. You know what? I got to give credit here. There's a screenwriter. I hope to have him on the show soon. His name is Tom Vaughn. And I know this by concept, but I've never put it as simply as he put it. And he was like, your ending doesn't have to be happy, doesn't have to be sad, it doesn't have to be exactly what your audience anticipated, but it has to be satisfying. Now, one easy way to satisfy the audience is to give them what they want, right? They want to see, Rocky win, and in Rocky 2 at least, you see him win. But it's more important that they're satisfied. That's when you can get away with the protagonist or the character not achieving their goal. If they achieve their emotional need, that is still satisfying to us as an audience, even if it's a tragedy and all things go to hell. You can still do that in a way that is satisfying, that we understand why as an audience. I remember watching Terminator 2 in 1991 with my brother. And when he had little John Connor had to drop Arnold Schwarzenegger's character down into the molten, lava pit or whatever and kill him, that was a necessary thing. But boy, for a 10-year-old in the 90s, heartbreaking. Why does that have to happen? Well, of course it had to happen. But we could deal with that. It's satisfying. So I thought that was such a great way to put it. If we go back to the Rocky example, Rocky didn't win the heavyweight championship against Apollo Creed in Rocky 1, but he had this massive amount of transformation. He found Adrian, someone to love him. He grew in confidence. He became the man and the boxer that he thought that he could be. That is emotionally satisfying, even though he didn't have some valiant, heroic victory that we didn't expect. Ultimately, the payoff is the reward for the audience, the reward for their time, for watching the 2 or 3 hour movie, for reading the 80 or 100,000 word book. They have stuck with you through this because you made a promise that they were intrigued by and anticipated, And then you gave them progress that kept them coming back and watching or reading. And then the payoff. This is their reward. So it has to be satisfying for them. That's why that's such a good word that Tom Vaughan used. It has to be satisfying. If they have a thirst for this payoff, you have to quench it. And you should go above and beyond. It doesn't have to be happy again. It doesn't have to be exactly what they expected again. But they need to feel like the time they invested was worth it. So even if there's a twist and it's totally unexpected, they need to leave that story feeling like, yeah, I'm glad I did that. And you need to over-deliver that payoff, to be honest. Now, let's go back to what I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the progress, and I said I would come back to this point. Now, when you get the payoff, when they receive the payoff, and you look back at the progress, it needs to have been crafted and created in a way that each piece of that progress was necessary for that payoff to happen. If we think about the characters, they need to go through all of those ups and downs, even the setbacks, even the moments where they wanted to quit. All of that was necessary for that narrative arc that we're following. All of the conflict and struggles that you deal with in your business, on your mission to pursue this transformation that you have promised the world, that you have guaranteed the world. All of those ups and downs are worth it because they are leading to the payoff of that promise. That is how you make a story that is exciting. I think it was Bill Burr that once said, the perfect joke is if you whittle it all the way down to the point where if you removed one word more out of that joke, the joke wouldn't work. Think about that. So you cut all the fat and leave every single piece that's necessary, so much so that if you remove just one piece further, it wouldn't land. That's the same process you want to take with your storytelling. You don't want to veer off on some tangent that doesn't lead us to the payoff. Even if at that time in the progress, we're like, what is this scene about? That's when you bring it full circle, and in the payoff, we understand why. So it's okay to do that, but at the end, it needs to tie back in to that payoff. So that way, the promise, the progress, and the payoff are all tightly woven together in that narrative arc. Before we go, let's look at some examples. And I'm not going to use movies and books in this example. I want to use something more realistic, because if you're watching or listening to this show, I think most of you all are applying this to your business or brand efforts. Not all of you, but a lot of you. So let's think about this in a YouTube tutorial, for example. Let's say that you're creating a YouTube video that's like, I'm going to show you how to fix this audio glitch in Adobe Premiere in 5 minutes. That's the promise. It's pretty clear, right? So then you need to make progress in that video, in that tutorial. It starts with step 1 all the way through the final step, right? The progress makes sense. You don't want to just jump to 7, and you don't want to just do 1 and 2, and then you kind of fall off and talk generally about audio theory, right? Progress, steps, breadcrumbs, right? And then what's the payoff? The user understands. Boom, it clicks, and then they can go apply it. Does that feel super simple? Like I might have skirted past something? Yeah, I didn't. That's it. You set up a promise. You have progress towards that promise, and then you have the payoff. It's simple as that. This is what I want you to take away from this episode and this season, is that keep it simple in terms of the structure. And once you have that intact, then you go on and add the beautiful things. I always talk about it like a house. You have to have the foundation. You have to have the framing. You have to have like the roof, framing of the roof, right? And then you can go back and say like, what if I put a bay window here? Ooh, I definitely want hardwood floors, etc., etc. That's what makes it a home. You need both. You need the art and the science. Keep the science simple. Understand all the things that are complex about it, but keep it simple and make sure that you deliver. And then you add all of those beautiful elements, the art that comes from you. Now, what I want you to think about in any story that you're working on, this could be the LinkedIn post that you're going to put out today. This could be the movie masterpiece that you're going to produce next year. I want you to think about, What is the thing I'm ultimately promising? Again, remember, if it's a bigger story, like a movie, like a book, then there's multiple promises that you are making. But you ask yourself, what am I promising? Then if you're in the middle of it, if you're like stuck in that Act 2 slump, am I making progress towards that promise? This is something that is very helpful when you start to get off track, which is very easy to do. Remind yourself, like, where was this story supposed to be going? And is it still going in that general direction that would lead me to this ultimate payoff? Then you ask yourself, is that satisfying? Did I deliver on the promise that I made back on page 1? And if not, you got a little bit of work to do. But it's as simple as these 3 steps: promise, progress, and payoff. Think about this. No matter what size story that you are telling, it will work. It will help keep your story grounded in that narrative through line so that your audience will latch onto it for the entire ride. That's it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Storytelling Lab. Season 14 coming at you soon. Appreciate you all very much. If you enjoyed this episode or enjoyed this season, think about leaving us a review. That is extremely helpful. And I'm excited about all the new guests coming up in season 14. Take care. Tell beautiful stories. My name is Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab.